Want to boost your gut without spending a fortune on store-bought probiotics? Today I'm going to be sharing something with you that I wish I had learned years ago. We're going to be taking our homemade lacto-fermented sauerkraut and turning it into probiotic powerhouse pills that'll be really easy to get your family to take. So come on with me, we're going to show you every single step of the process. About 15 years ago as a new mom, I realized that my family was getting just about every single stomach flu that came through the community. It was not pretty. And so I set out on a mission to strengthen our family's gut health. One of the things that I did is I really got probiotic rich foods into my family. And I saw their health change pretty quickly, actually. Nowadays, we seem pretty resilient to the stomach things and actually most things in general. And I really credit that to the gut health that we've built by integrating great probiotics into our family's diet. We know that probiotic-rich foods really help to increase our gut health, making our immune system stronger and making us altogether more healthy. But the problem is that buying probiotic pills, especially the good quality ones, are incredibly expensive. They can be up to easily $75 for just a small bottle of probiotic pills. And if you're trying to give them to your whole family, that really quickly becomes unaffordable. But that's okay, because there's really easy answers for that I'm going to be showing you in just a minute. But first, let's talk about an internet myth that was going around a few years ago, that bacteria in probiotic foods doesn't survive your digestive tract. But thankfully, studies have proven that to be completely wrong. Studies have shown us that just a tablespoon of your homemade sauerkraut can contain 10 million to 10 billion CFUs. That means colony-forming units, and it's the way they rate how much bacteria is actually in a probiotic. And that amount rivals some of the top supplements out there. But then when you start adding in the prebiotics and the nutrients from the cabbage that's used to make the sauerkraut, it means that your homemade probiotic sauerkraut is super cost-effective and really health promoting. So today we're gonna be making some sauerkraut, but we're gonna take it a step further and we're gonna turn it into pills that you can give to your family for those probiotics. So why are we making the pills instead of just eating the sauerkraut? Well, just eating the sauerkraut is a great way to go, and it's gonna get you all of those amazing probiotics that you can get out of the sauerkraut. But I don't know about your family. Not everybody in my family loves eating sauerkraut. So turning your sauerkraut into probiotic-rich pills is a family-friendly way to get those probiotics into everyone that you love. Let me know in the comments if you struggle with getting your family to eat probiotic-rich foods too. To turn our sauerkraut into pills, we need one secret appliance, and that is a freeze dryer. Freeze dryers are really expensive, but I've seen people do it over and over again. If you just really put it to use, it can actually save you more off your grocery bill and your supplement bill than it costs, and you can do it within a year. But if you don't have one and you don't have plans to get one, make sure you ask a friend who has one if you can just do a few runs or a few trays in their freeze dryer. Now, a freeze dryer is really important for this because it's been shown that freeze drying retains much more live bacteria than any other drying method, including just dehydrating. So probiotic pills with live bacteria in it are exactly what we're going for. So that's why you want to use a freeze dryer. To make our pills, we're going to have three main steps. One, we have to actually make and ferment our sauerkraut. 2, we're gonna freeze dry our sauerkraut. And then 3, we're gonna make a powder and encapsulate it to make it really easy to take. So let's dive right into this simple process. Hey, but before we start, make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our special projects that we do here on the homestead. So step number 1 is making our lacto-fermented sauerkraut. Now we want to make sure we take a little bit of care with this because we want to make a really probiotic rich sauerkraut. So for our ingredients, you're going to need about 1 medium-sized fresh cabbage. This recipe I'm going to give you is going to fill about 1 tray, but you can of course always make multiple jars of your sauerkraut to make a big batch of the pills. You'll also need a sea salt. Make sure it's something that's non-iodized, not table salt. For your tools, you're gonna want a bowl, a mason jar, quart-sized is probably best for this. I really like the fermentation weights. I feel like they really help. So I like to use those. I like the kind that have the little knob on the top so it's easy to pick them up out of the jar. You'll also want something that you can pound your cabbage into the jar with, so a wooden spoon or a sauerkraut pounder is great. Now you're gonna start by finely shredding your cabbage. Now if you're gonna wanna get really technical about this, it's great to go ahead and cut out the core and then weigh your cabbage. You're gonna be aiming for about a 2% salt ratio. But if you're happy with good enough, then just 1 medium cabbage to about 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of salt will be good enough. So you can go that way. So just shred that cabbage finely, stick it in a bowl and sprinkle it with the salt and massage it until all the juices start to release and the leaves soften up. That'll take about 5 to 10 minutes. Alternately, you can just cover it with a clean cloth and walk away for half an hour to an hour and let the salt kind of do the work for you. I'm kind of a lazy homesteader, so I usually walk away and just let time take its action. When you come back an hour or 2 later, the juices will be all released. Then you're gonna pack this tightly into a mason jar, making sure that at the end, your cabbage is entirely submerged under the brine. Add your fermentation weight and screw your lid on very loosely. Don't put it on all the way tight because this is gonna be letting out a lot of gases. Make sure you place this inside either a casserole pan or some sort of a dish because it has a tendency to release some of the brine back out and you don't really want that all over your counter. So you're gonna ferment this at whatever your room temperature is. You know, usually we're looking for about 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit for about 7 to 14 days. Make sure you're looking for lots of bubbles to start forming, usually around day 3. And then at some point, the bubbles will slow down, the color will change a little bit, and you'll get something that looks and smells much more like sauerkraut rather than just fresh cabbage. When you see that, stick your sauerkraut into the fridge until you're ready to take the next step. If you're not really sure what you're looking for, just go ahead and stick it in the fridge at about the 10-day mark and that'll be good enough. Now that we have our probiotic-rich sauerkraut, let's turn it into that shelf-stable powder. And we're gonna do that with step number 2, freeze drying the sauerkraut. Now this is really easy if you have a freeze dryer. All you're gonna do is take your sauerkraut. I like to strain it out so there's not so much brine in it, and I save that brine for other uses, things like salad dressing or just taking in shot form for a really strong dose of probiotics. I like it, not everybody likes that. But you're gonna take the sauerkraut itself and spread it thinly on one of your freeze dryer trays. I like to line mine either with a silicone pad or parchment paper for this. Then you're gonna go ahead and stick it into your freeze dryer, but there's one change you need to make to the freeze dryer settings. And that is that you're gonna need to go hit that custom button or the customize button on your menu and drop the max temperature of your freeze dryer down to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Generally, the default is at about 125 degrees Fahrenheit. And that temperature can kill off some of the probiotics in your sauerkraut, so we don't want that. So if you drop that down to 95 degrees, you're gonna have a much more probiotic-rich product at the end. Then go ahead and follow your machine's instructions to freeze dry your sauerkraut, and make sure when you get it out of the freeze dryer that it is crispy and dry in texture with nothing cold or soft or anything about it. If you find any cold, soft spots, stick it back into your freeze dryer for a couple hours of more dry time. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and turn our sauerkraut into a powder and get it into the pills. Now our sauerkraut is all nice and crispy, and so we're just gonna turn it into a powder. You can see that one jar of sauerkraut we made, that one head of cabbage turned into about one large freeze dryer tray. And so now I'm going to use a coffee grinder to go ahead and turn this into a powder. If you were doing a really big batch, you could definitely use a food processor or a blender, but just make sure that whatever you're using is completely bone dry, because we don't want to introduce any liquid into this freeze-dried sauerkraut at this point. Otherwise, it won't turn into a powder and it won't be shelf stable. When I'm just doing a tray or two, I just like to do them in small batches. Just here in this little coffee grinder. It seems to work out really well. I can control the consistency a little bit better, but it does just take a minute or two to get it all into that uniform fine powder. Wow, that is one whole tray of our sauerkraut. Remember, that was one head of cabbage turned into 1 quart jar of sauerkraut, fit on one large freeze dryer tray. And look at how condensed that is. Now that is the power of freeze drying when it comes to space saving. This much right here is a whole quart jar of sauerkraut. So this is really, really probiotic rich. But it's not gonna be enough to fill our capsules, so I'm gonna go ahead and process the rest of the trays that I have in the freeze dryer, and then we'll get to filling our capsules. My sauerkraut powder is all ready to go. This was about 3 trays full, or 3 quart jars worth of sauerkraut, and you can see it made a nice amount. This is gonna make several hundred capsules for me of this really good probiotic pills. I wish you guys could smell this because it's making my mouth water. It's very tangy smelling. And if you eat the powder just like this, like take a little pinch of it, it tastes just like sauerkraut. So it's really good. If you need to store this powder for any reason, you're gonna wanna make sure that you put an airtight lid on it and vacuum seal it, and then it will last on your shelf. Room temperature, especially out of direct sunlight, for up to a year with really good probiotic, action still. And that'll be the same of your pills when you finish them. So let's look at moving ahead and turning this into our capsules. The star of the show for this is the Encapsulate by the company Herb Affair. I love this thing. We use it for all sorts of things in our home. And now that we've started freeze drying our own herbs and different supplements, we're adding even more homemade supplements to our regimen. Things like ginger works really well, cayenne, whatever it is that you need to take. If you can grow it, you can turn it into a capsule, which is really neat. So this has quite a few parts, but it makes creating capsules really, really fast and easy. Now, they sell the capsules. What I like to do is make sure that I get the capsules that are already separated tops from bottoms, so you don't have to go and separate every single capsule. Some companies sell them already put together, and it's an absolute pain. So this is the bottoms right here. And today I'm working with a double-aught size. That's kind of your standard capsule size. You can just get a 0 size. That's a little bit bigger. So we're going to start with the frame plate, and this plate is what's going to help get your capsules into the right section. So again, the bottoms of the capsules, and we're just going to kind of jiggle them right on in. Now these aren't counted out or anything, so I don't know if I have the correct number, but we'll find out in a minute. We're just gonna kind of move them around, shake them around a little bit, and they'll all start going into their spots. Now when you get down to the last few, you may just have to hand do them. You can kind of see right in there which ones don't have capsules. This is probably the hardest part of the entire thing, and it's definitely the most time-consuming part. Just make sure that every little hole has its capsule. That's important because if it doesn't have a capsule at the bottom of it, all your powder is just going to go right on into the frame and it will make a mess. Okay, I've got some extra in here. Now you can imagine how long this would take if you were trying to take the top and the bottom of each capsule and put it into the powder and hand make all these capsules. That would take forever. But this way is pretty easy. Now we're gonna pull this frame plate off and just push down lightly to take a look and make sure everything's right. And what I can see is that I have every single capsule filled, but I have one that turned around and its bottom is sticking up instead of the top. So I have to just pop that guy out and turn him around the right way. There we go, and put him back in. Okay, now I'm ready to move on. Now I'm gonna get my spill plate here and my powder, and it's only gonna take several tablespoons of powder to fill up all 100 capsules. I'm gonna get the little scraper here, and we're just gonna move this powder all the way around to fill it up. Make sure you're filling up every single one of these. I'm gonna get all that good probiotic power in every single capsule. All right, and then I wanna get the tamper plate right here and just kind of pack it down. That just makes sure that they're nice and filled. And then I can add a little bit more powder if I need to. And finish moving around the powder that I have on here. All right, and once you get to your extra powder, you can just put it back into your jar for your next batch. That powder's precious. I don't want to waste any of it. Now we have to get our lids ready. And to do that, we're going to take this plate right here. This one is called the capping plate. And we're going to set that frame plate right back on it. Now we're going to take our lids or our tops of our capsules, and we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with the bottoms. We're just going to kind of jiggle it in lightly to fill up all of them. Now you can see this is kind of one of those projects that would be really easy to do if you're sitting around with your family for the evening, just reading or watching something. We like to do this for our allergy pills that we make every year. That's made a really big difference, and we make hundreds of those every year. I'll put a link to that in the description for you, so you can go see that. And I have a few extras here. Actually, I have a lot extra, so I'm going to pull those out. Several of these flipped upside down, and we don't want that. That will mess up the entire, capping process. So we just want to take a moment right now and flip around any that turned upside down. We want to turn them around so that their open parts are facing up instead of those rounded parts. Now we're going to take what's called our middle plate and we're going to set it on top of the entire thing. And we're going to take our capsules and we're going to flip our tops right onto the bottom part. Boop. Line it all up, and then you're going to press down on the corners, nice and firm. Give it a good press, And you now have 100 capsules that are all entirely filled and ready to go into storage. Now, just like that powder, when you go to store these, you're going to want to vacuum seal any jars that you're not currently using. If you make a bunch of these, remember, they'll sit on your shelf for up to a year. So let's go get these in storage. Now, for our family, we can go through a lot of these really quickly. So I'm gonna put it in a quart-sized jar. For your family, if you have a smaller family, you're gonna wanna put it in smaller sizes. Probably you wanna store it in the size of something that you can consume in about a month. You know what, there's a much easier way to do that. Let's just grab our funnel here. Okay. And we can just go ahead and turn it right on into there. You could also dump this into a bowl or onto a plate and then put it into the funnel. That might be a little faster. Now, when we get these made, the batch that we're currently taking, we can go ahead and just keep in your kitchen cabinet. Just keep a lid on it and that'll be fine. But to store the excess, you're gonna wanna get them into a jar that you can get airtight, just like a mason jar. You're gonna wanna vacuum seal that. So here we go. We just have a mason jar. I love these little handy vacuum sealers that are just all in one right there. And like everything on the homestead, make sure you label it with the contents and the date. Now, recommended dosage of this is about 2 to 4 capsules for an adult every single day. That's gonna give you that really good probiotic boost. But remember, we have no way of actually judging how many CFUs of bacteria there are in your homemade sauerkraut pills, so you may have to adjust that based on your personal experience. Now that you have these stored, they are ready to use to help your family have better health for way, way cheaper. And you can see that while there were a couple steps to the project, it was actually all really easy, and the active work of all of those pieces is under half an hour to make 100 probiotic pills. Isn't that amazing? Check out this other supplement that our family makes at home. It makes a big difference in our health.